The sterile fluorescent lights of the Summit Vista retirement community felt like a cage, a cold, unyielding space that was the antithesis of the soaring blue skies I had commanded for half a century. I am Martha, an 82-year-old retired airline pilot, and my life had been defined by a freedom that few ever truly experience. The roar of a jet engine, the steady hand on the yoke, the endless expanse of blue and white. That was my world. My home in Scottsdale, a sprawling ranch with a hangar on the property, was a testament to that life. It was a place where my own wings were still tethered, a place filled with the ghosts of flights and the quiet memories of my late husband. But my daughter, Charlotte, and her husband, Brian, had convinced me it was for my own good. They spoke in hushed, practiced tones of the overwhelming property taxes, the relentless upkeep, and the complexities of property management. Their script was perfect, filled with feigned concern that masked a desperate greed. They would handle the sale of the house, they promised, and secure my future with a portion of the proceeds. The look in their eyes as they dropped me off, a look of hurried, practiced indifference, was a familiar sight from my days in the cockpit. I had seen it in the faces of young co-pilots eager to impress. But this time, it was laced with something colder, something calculating. It was the look of a crew member who knows the plane is going down and is already planning their escape. The final sight of their brand new, luxury sedan disappearing down the drive was a quiet confirmation of my darkest fear. They had stolen my freedom, and were now flying away with it. But what they didn't know was that a retired pilot always has a backup plan, and my ultimate freedom was never in their control. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and press that bell icon so you don't miss our next true stories, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Your support helps us share these messages with more people who need hope. My life was a paradox of precision and freedom. I had spent my career flying the most advanced aircraft, but my greatest passion was my old, vintage Cessna plane, which I kept in the hangar on my property. My late husband, a brilliant legal mind who specialized in estate planning, had set up an ironclad trust to protect my assets. The asset protection was so robust that accessing the funds required my explicit, notarized consent, and all financial transactions had to be approved through a series of legal safeguards. My husband, a man who had seen the worst of human greed in his work, had crafted a fortress of legal documents designed to be impenetrable to all but the most sophisticated forms of financial fraud. However, my daughter, Charlotte, and her husband, Brian, a slick corporate lawyer who specialized in corporate litigation and fiduciary duty cases, had spent years in a silent war against the safeguards put in place by my husband. They were a couple obsessed with appearances and status, their social media a glossy facade of wealth they couldn't afford. They were bleeding money from their credit cards and high-interest loans, all to maintain a lavish lifestyle that included frequent trips to Las Vegas and extravagant dinners in downtown Phoenix. Their desperation reached a fever pitch when they secretly invested in a multi-million-dollar real estate investment in Tempe, a fraudulent land development project that was a complete sham and was quickly consuming all their available capital. They presented me with what they called a trust restructuring amendment, a document they insisted was a necessary update to my legal affairs, required by the recent changes in probate law. They showed me a series of beautifully designed digital documents, complete with official-looking logos from reputable firms and notarized stamps, all meticulously forged to lend an air of authenticity. They used the power of attorney I had foolishly granted them years earlier for simple medical affairs as a key to a complex scheme. They claimed it would grant them the legal authority to manage my affairs in case of an emergency, and that they had taken legal consultation to ensure every step was correct. The final, damning betrayal came when they convinced me to sign a new living will that would, in reality, grant them total control over my finances and the right to my property under the guise of my own protection. The document, which they had carefully crafted to be a convoluted legal web, was a vehicle for their fraud. It was so complex that it would, once signed, allow them to bypass the trust's original terms and legally seize my assets. The final page of the document contained a single signature line, which I, with a heart full of trust for my own family, signed without a second thought. I had just signed away my freedom, my legacy, and everything my husband had worked for. I discovered the betrayal in the most shocking and visceral way. It wasn't through a formal letter or a phone call, but through the sudden, welcome, and utterly out-of-place presence of my old friend and rival, Captain Alex Rodriguez. A retired cargo pilot and now a successful tech entrepreneur, Alex had been trying to reach me for months to celebrate our shared record of trans-Pacific flights. He'd recently flown his private jet into Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, and upon learning I was in a nursing home, was immediately suspicious. He didn't waste a moment. He showed up at Summit Vista that afternoon, his face a mask of disbelief and confusion. "Martha, what in the world are you doing here?" he asked, his voice a low rumble of concern that cut through the silence of the lounge. I told him everything, from the trust documents to the promises of a new life. As I spoke, his face grew grim, and his jaw clenched with a familiar anger. He immediately excused himself, his mind already calculating the next move. He was a man of action, and he had a vast network of connections. From the hallway, I could hear him on the phone, his voice a low, urgent murmur as he spoke to his legal consultation team, a firm specializing in financial fraud cases. The shock came with their findings, a series of revelations, so vile they felt like a physical assault. The initial blow was the discovery that my property in Scottsdale hadn't been sold at all. Instead, it was put up as collateral for a massive, multi-million-dollar mortgage taken out by a shell corporation. They didn't want the money, they wanted the property's value. A strategic move to avoid any trace of the funds being tied directly to my bank accounts. Alex's team quickly identified the shell corporation's legal and financial architects. My son-in-law, Brian, a man whose legal acumen was now a weapon against his own family. Brian had orchestrated a sophisticated fraudulent conveyance scheme, and the paper trail was a testament to his legal brilliance and moral depravity. The title deed to my home had been transferred into a fraudulent land trust, and the funds from the mortgage were not placed in a secure escrow account, but were immediately funneled into the failing land development project in Tempe. This wasn't a family selling a house. It was a complex financial operation designed to drain a property of its value without my knowledge or consent. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was a massive litigation nightmare, a legal assault from within my own family. Alex's lawyers immediately filed for an injunctive relief to freeze the assets and prevent further transfers, and prepared a lawsuit seeking punitive damages for the blatant elder abuse they had committed. The final, brutal twist was when Alex's team discovered the fate of my vintage Cessna. They had not sold it. They had leased it to a shadowy international shipping company for a series of illegal cargo runs, a high-risk operation that could get them a massive, quick payout. My freedom, a symbol of my life's work and my late husband's legacy, had become a vehicle for their crime. It was a desecration of my very being. The physical manifestation of my life, the plane I had flown to freedom for so long, was now a tool for their greed. The knowledge hit me with the force of a high-speed collision. My chest tightened and my breath caught in my throat. I felt a wave of nausea and the room began to spin. My body, which had withstood the G-forces of a jet and the unforgiving turbulence of a storm, was now collapsing under the weight of my family's betrayal. I was a witness to my own demise, and the ultimate legal liability for their actions would fall on me. My freedom, the thing I cherished most, had become a vehicle for their crime. The knowledge was a poison that seeped into my veins, a cold, bitter certainty that I was utterly and completely alone. With the shocking truth laid bare by Alex, my world didn't just tilt, it shattered into a million pieces. The sterile, artificial air of my room seemed to thicken, suffocating me. The betrayal was no longer an abstract idea. It was a physical affliction. That night, a pain I hadn't known since the day I lost my husband seized me with a vengeance. It was a physical manifestation of my righteous anger, a fire that consumed my bones and a weight that crushed my spirit until my lungs screamed for air. My body, which had once endured the G-forces of a jet and the unforgiving turbulence of a storm, was now collapsing under the weight of my family's betrayal. I lay in the darkness, a broken, hoarse sound escaping my lips, begging for a sign, for something, anything to hold on to. My eyes, blurred with tears of fury and despair, were drawn to the worn, leather-bound Bible on my nightstand, a simple gift from a compassionate nurse. I reached for it, my trembling hand finding the cool, textured cover. The moment my fingers made contact, an ethereal light, as pure and white as a cumulus cloud on a summer day, began to radiate from the book. It wasn't a glare, it was a soft, glowing warmth that filled the room. The air, once thick and heavy, became fragrant with the scent of lilies. As if guided by an unseen hand, the pages of the Bible fluttered open on their own, and my gaze, no longer blurred, fell upon the words from Matthew. Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and ye shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. But it wasn't just text on a page. The words seemed to glow, luminous and alive, and a profound, supernatural stillness filled the room. The crushing weight on my chest lifted in a single, breathtaking moment. The fire in my bones was extinguished, replaced by a radiant, supernatural warmth that flowed into every part of my being. I felt my joints, once stiff with age and despair, become fluid. My weary heart, once heavy with grief, felt a surge of strength. I was a vessel of faith, a living testament to his promise, and with that realization, a profound calm settled over me. The next morning, I rose from my bed, not as a frail old woman, but as a pilot preparing for the most important flight of my life. My reflection in the mirror was no longer that of a defeated woman. My eyes held a fire I hadn't seen in decades. My gait was steady, my movements deliberate. My very essence was transformed, radiating a quiet, unshakable peace. When I walked into the main lounge, the low murmur of conversation ceased. The nurses looked at me bewildered, as if they were seeing a ghost who had suddenly found her corporeal form. Alex was waiting for me, and as he looked at me, his eyes widened in silent awe. He didn't ask what had happened, he simply nodded, his face a silent affirmation of our shared mission. I didn't say goodbye to the staff, there was no need. They had been a temporary haven. As I passed the front desk, I felt a powerful, undeniable pressure on my shoulder, not a gentle touch, but the palpable living hand of the Lord, a divine current that coursed through my veins, giving me a strength I hadn't felt in a lifetime. I wasn't running away from the nursing home. I was walking toward a new life, a life of purpose and peace, propelled by a force far greater than myself. The doors of the facility, once a symbol of my confinement, swung open effortlessly as I approached, a final, physical affirmation of my spiritual liberation. The morning air, crisp and fresh, was a stark contrast to the stagnant air of my room. My feet, which had once shuffled in defeat, now moved with purpose on the pavement. I was no longer a prisoner of my helplessness. I was a vessel of faith, a living testament to his promise, walking away from my past and into his grace. Alex's home was a magnificent estate near Lake Pleasant, a stark contrast to the sterile halls of the nursing home. For weeks, the hum of legal action filled his home office, a cacophony of procedural law, frantic phone calls, and the rustle of documents. We worked tirelessly with his legal team, a formidable group of litigation attorneys, and a renowned property law specialist. They meticulously built our case, focusing on the fraudulent mortgage and the invalidity of the restructuring amendment I had signed. We filed for a temporary restraining order to prevent my children from taking any further action. The sheer audacity of Brian's plan was the key to our defense. The lawyers argued that the mortgage was a blatant sham transaction, a fraudulent legal instrument designed to strip my assets. We hired a forensic accountant to follow the money, a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts that led to the Tempe Land Development Project. The authorities were already building a criminal case for elder abuse and securities fraud, and our civil suit for punitive damages became a powerful parallel track. Our biggest challenge, however, was locating my plane. It was a vintage Cessna, a single-engine aircraft that was not equipped with a modern transponder. Brian and Charlotte, in their desperation, had leased it to a shadowy international shipping company for a series of illegal cargo runs. Alex, a former pilot himself, knew the telltale signs of such an operation. He leveraged his network of contacts and our knowledge of the Cessna's unique modifications to track it. We obtained satellite coordinates from a contact at a government agency, and for weeks we watched its silent, erratic movements across a digital map, a ghost on a screen. Our chase led us across the American Southwest and into Mexico, where we saw it landing on remote, unlisted airstrips. The climax came in a stunning development. The plane was suddenly impounded by federal agents in Baja California, a massive win for our side. It was caught in a multi-agency sting operation involving drug trafficking. The ultimate irony was that my plane, a symbol of my freedom, had been used to commit a crime that was now destroying the very people who had taken it from me. My freedom was not just a memory, but a living, breathing thing that was fighting back on its own. The day the news broke, it was a spectacular and public spectacle. The Phoenix Business Journal didn't just run a story. It published an exhaustive expose on the front page, under a screaming headline, "Prominent Lawyer Exposed in Elder Fraud and Real Estate Scheme." The article meticulously detailed the massive land fraud scheme orchestrated by my son-in-law, Brian. It described how Brian, a disgraced corporate lawyer whose reputation was now in tatters, had conspired with my daughter to use my property as collateral for a non-existent real estate development that was, in fact, a complex and sprawling money laundering operation. The paper trail, a masterpiece of legal deception and moral rot, was laid bare for the world to see. The federal agents, acting on a tip-off from Alex's team, had already tracked the illegal cargo flights from my plane back to Brian Shell Corporation, a smoking gun that led them directly to his doorstep. The raid wasn't just a news story, it was a live event, broadcast on every local news station, from ABC 15 News to KPNX TV. I watched, detached and numb, as a convoy of black SUVs and police cars swarmed their sprawling, custom-built home. The live footage showed Brian and Charlotte, once so immaculately composed, being led away in handcuffs, their faces a mixture of shock, fury, and bewildered disbelief. The brutal display of their downfall was a spectacle for millions, a stark contrast to the quiet, private betrayal they had orchestrated in the sterile walls of my nursing home. The legal fallout was swift and merciless. They were stripped of their assets, every designer suit, every piece of expensive furniture, every painting that Charlotte had bragged about on social media. Their licenses were revoked, their professional reputations were annihilated, and their luxurious home was seized by the bank. In a few short weeks, they lost everything. The very objects they had coveted and used to justify their monstrous betrayal were sold off. I heard their designer clothes were sold on Poshmark to make rent. Their luxury car was repossessed, and they were evicted from their home. They had no money, no jobs, and no friends. The social network they had so painstakingly cultivated disappeared in an instant, their supposed friends scattering like rats from a sinking ship. The most poetic justice came from their attempt to flee. They had a single, rusted-out car, a forgotten relic they had purchased for Brian's younger brother years ago and never sold. It was their last remaining asset, a final symbol of their utter, pathetic desperation. They were now sleeping in that car, an old, dilapidated sedan, in a remote lot near Papago Park, the same place where they had once boasted to potential investors of their future developments, their grand plans for a new downtown Phoenix skyline. They were utterly broken, hungry, and hopeless. The lavish life they had chased so frantically had evaporated, leaving them with nothing but the dust of their lies and the cold comfort of a rusted-out car. They had traded my freedom for a fleeting fantasy, and in the end, they were left with a reality far more brutal than any I had ever faced in the nursing home. Their downfall was not a fall from grace, but a final, sickening descent into the hell of their own making. One evening, as I was flying in Alex's private jet over the city, the news of their downfall, broadcast for the entire world to see, weighed heavily on my mind. I looked out the window at the endless sprawl of Phoenix's city lights below, a vast, luminous web of human lives. I knew that somewhere down there, in the cold shadow of their failed ambitions, my daughter and her husband were now living in a car, stripped of everything they had so desperately chased. The thought brought me no satisfaction, no feeling of vengeance. Instead, I felt a deep, profound peace. I had a new home, a new life, and a new community of friends who valued me not for what I owned, but for who I was. The ultimate lesson of my story is this: true freedom is not in what you possess, but in the strength of your spirit. My family tried to take everything from me, but in doing so, they gave me the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to rebuild my life on a foundation of faith, not greed. My journey was not about revenge, but about a peace that transcends all understanding. My house was taken, but my home was never truly lost. If you have been a victim of financial abuse or elder fraud, remember that you are not alone. There are people who will help you, and there is a God who will guide you. Your support helps us share these messages of hope and resilience with more people who are searching for their own beacon of light in the darkness. Thank you, and may God bless you in your darkest moments and beyond.